Hello there, and welcome to Story Time. I'm your host, Sandez Rey, alias J. Scott Naylor. I had a different YouTube channel, which I called Underground Artist. And it occurs to me that not very many people who are watching this channel know much about my comic book experience drawing comics. So you could go to my YouTube channel, Underground Artist, which I abandoned after doing a few videos because Underground Artist, I discovered, is such a horrible name for a YouTube channel, because when you search it, you come up with page after page after page of hip-hop videos and performance art and you name it, everything in the kitchen sink. So you need a more unique name than that. The videos are still online. If you want to know more about my comic career, or if you can call it a career, my comic hobby I guess I should call it, although I have worked professionally on many occasions and for years. But if you want to know more about that, you can go to a video called I Am the Underground Artist Part 1. And if you search that specific title, I Am the Underground Artist Part 1, you will hear a full half-hour video about my experiences working in the independent comics field and working for Fantagraphics, doing underground comics, working for Carnal Comics, and having a story published by Last Gasp, and some other, self-publishing and some other things about me. But in the meantime, for this channel, there's something that I wanted to do, was to actually read one of the stories that I contributed in the 4 years that I worked at Fantagraphics. Now, I worked for Fantagraphics for 4 years part-time, but I contributed a lot during that time, considering I was only a part-time jobber. I sold them 16 five-page stories for their underground sex anthology comics, which they were then publishing under an imprint that they called Eros, E-R-O-S, Eros. And sold them 16 stories for their anthology comics, and then signed a deal to do 3 full-length issues, did 2 of them, and then they begged out of the deal because they were cutting back across the boards. It was nothing to do with sales of my book, but they were cutting back across the board on their whole commitment to comics, really, but specifically their commitment to underground comics. And so I got dumped off at that particular moment, which is fine, because they never really made an effort to publicize my work or anything. So anyways, if you want to hear more about that, look up the video I Am the Underground Artist Part 1 on my other YouTube channel. And if you want to see me drawing in action on a whiteboard, I also had a YouTube channel which I experimented with and then dropped, called Draw It All Dojo, D-O-J-O. But for the benefit of this channel, I'm going to read out loud a very entertaining story, one of my favorite stories that I ever produced for Fantagraphics, from this underground comic, which is a sex anthology, but I won't be showing any of the actual sex pictures. I will show you the cover. The cover has a cartoon of a woman. Her breasts are bare, as you can see, but artistic drawings of nudity are not prohibited on YouTube or anywhere, really. They're in museums. So this is the comic. It was called Head. Now, each one of these comics had a title that was specific to a particular sex act. The most popular comic was Blowjob. And I contributed 7 stories, I believe, to Blowjob. I was in it more than any other artist. But, and they had a comic called Rear Entry and a comic called Dildo. They even had experimented with a comic about peeing, which I thought was completely unsexy, but I gave them a story anyways because my editor wanted me to. These stories, we were given a free hand, us artists were given a free hand to write any kind of story as long as it contained the particular kind of sex act that was in the title. Now, I was told by my editor, Michael Dowers, that head referred only, I thought head was synonymous with blowjob, but I was told that head referred specifically to going down on a lady, a femme. And I had not heard that. Maybe that's a West Coast thing. I always thought the 2 terms were synonymous and interchangeable. But so anyways, Head, the only requirement on this story was that it have some female on female downstairs action. And I included that. And I wish I could show you some of the art, because the art is groovy. But I can't. So, but it's a short story, but it's funny. and I'm going to read it starting now. Picture the scene, okay? We have I'm going to show you this because there's no sex in it, but we have a 3/4 page splash down here, and then a 1/4 strip of panels up here. And in the top tier, there's the headquarters of the Circle of Honor, which is my group of superheroes. And inside is the Blue Circle, the Black Dwarf, and the Enchanted Dagger, who are all actual characters from public domain. By the way, before I embark on this, let me just say that the comic was rated XXX, but the reading will be rated XX for Dos Equis. I have been up all night. I worked my straight job last night, so I might get a little loopy with this reading, but let's go for it anyway. So, it begins. A sunny Sunday morning in South Minneapolis, the Circle of Honor hangs out at their secret penthouse headquarters. Hey guys, there's a giant monster robot thing attacking France. Do we want to, help? That was the Blue Circle, and the Black Dwarf immediately says, "Fuck that!" The Enchanted Dagger, who's reading a newspaper, says, "Maybe we can monitor the situation in case the monster attacks someplace important." The Blue Circle gets a panicked look on his face, and he says, "Guys, we've got a bigger problem now." Big splash page of aquatic female nubile Amazonian warriors coming out of the sea and fighting with the Crimson Gash. And the narration reads, "Projectile vomiting out of the briny depths come the unstoppable legions of Queen Clitoria, ruler of cursed Atlantis. Atlantis, swept beneath the waves by the wrath of Titan, a city destined to evolve a bizarre backward society where women dominate men and men whine incessantly about their feelings. It's a scientific fact. Women are water signs, men are earth signs. Therefore, logically, women forced to live at the bottom of the sea would evolve into fierce, statuesque Amazons, whilst men would devolve into a hairless, spineless, gelatinous creatures known only as the unmen. The evidence of this is now overwhelming, and is disputed only by racists, homophobes, and Al Gore. Now, for the first time on any comic page, witness the unforgettable true story of the Atlantazon invasion. Thrill to the epic battle on page 1. Laugh at the witless antics of a pathetic drunk. Shudder with stomach-churning horror at the revelation of Clitoria's secret. Light a doobie and tune in to the tripped-out vibes of the psychedelic love-in on page 4. Blow hot coffee out your nose in shock and awe at the unexpected brain blasting. Drawn entirely in spectacular boo-barama. This is Sandez Rey's greatest masterpiece. The battle for the ages begins now. Atlantazon Invasion. Now, excuse me. Now on the next page we have a multiple shot of many of these delectable but fishy looking women with black and white hair. They're all going down on the male members of our armed forces. And it reads, "Unfortunately, the unorthodox strategy of the Atlantazons quickly overcomes America's military might." God damn it. Next we see a general, an ancient general with a walker, the Crimson Gash, the Blue Circle, and the Black Dwarf, who appears to be drunk, and another general, all standing in front of the massed army of the Atlantazons, who are apparently triumphant. And the Crimson Gash says, "I can't believe it's come to this. Unconditional surrender." The Blue Circle, "To be fair, those fish girls can really suck." The Crimson Gash says, "They're the best. That's why I hate them so. Who would have thought that the President of the United States would sell out our national security for a blowjob?" Blue Circle rolls his eyes and says, "That would never happen in the real world." The Crimson Gash says, "Shh, asshole." "Looks like the mayor's wrapping up." And the Blue Circle says, "Why the hell would the mayor of Minneapolis be surrendering for the nation? He volunteered. Listen, he's back on Texas again. That's $20 you owe me." "Christ on a crutch," says the Blue Circle. "Let it go already." Queen Clitoria reclines on her throne, flanked by her royal counselors, the jelly-like unmen. And we see the drunken mayor of Minneapolis, who's always drunk in these stories, holding his script for his surrender speech and saying, "In conclusion, Your Majesty, that is why I hate Texas." One of the unmen leans over and whispers to Queen Clitoria, "The surface dwellers have a tradition of granting political offices to a class of semi-morons who are too incompetent for productive work." The Queen says, "With noble intentions, to be sure, they have not the benefit of a pure matriarchal bloodline and cannot be held responsible for the deficiencies of their species. Are there any other rituals of surrender before I issue my decrees of conquest?" Crimson Gash steps up and says, "I claim a warrior's right of surrender. I am the Crimson Gash, Queen of the Werewolves, High Supreme Ass-Kicker of the surface world. My surrender is to humble myself before your royal person, licking your pussy until by strength of orgasm you relent all desire for conquest and give yourself over to what I will." The Queen responds, "A sporting proposition, brash one, and if your charms fail, I will grant you a life of practice as my personal slave. Are you prepared to gaze upon the hereditary mount of the Clitorian clan?" The Gash responds, "You bring it, I'll lick it. No pussy scares me." "Very well," says the Queen. "You have been warned," and we see her hands lifting her G-string away. "Behold!" And I have to tell you, it is a somewhat insectoid, somewhat fishy, pretty nasty looking hoo-ha down there. There's a close-up of it right here on page 3. The Gash responds, "Oi! It's wicked." Then she gets a closer look in the next panel and says, "Ah, it's a cute little thing, in a butt-ugly sort of way. It looks just like the great sea god Cthulhu. Try telling me that's a coincidence. I never would have guessed it, but this is the best smelling pussy I ever licked. It smells like flowers." The Queen responds, "It's lavender. Lavender scented soap. I am a queen, you know. I do wash." And now we have a psychedelic, swirly, multi-image montage of the Gash going down endlessly on the Queen while many of her Atlantazan warriors gaze on. The Queen then makes a peculiar, wait a minute, can't say that word, I'll fix it. The Queen then makes a peculiar, fishy, sort of dolphin, sort of orgasm sound after the long montage. It's sort of a aye sort of sound. And then in the next panel we see the Queen putting her foot firmly on the forehead of the Crimson Gash and forcing her head away from the vajayjay. And we hear the Queen saying, "Oh, wow, ow, oh, enough, stop, I relent." On the last page we see the Gash and the Queen snuggling close in aftermath, and the Queen with sweat on her forehead and a bizarrely sleepy look in her eyes says, "Very well, I will graciously restore the surface dwellers their lands and titles, on the condition that the Crimson Gash shall pay periodic tribute to my Clitorian throne." And the Gash responds, "Periodic? Girl, I'll give you my beeper number. You call me anytime. Now we see the Black Dwarf step out of the crowd. He's got a bottle of, apparently, Jack Daniels in his hand. And he's got a 45 in the other hand. He's clearly drunk. Excuse me. And he says, "Freeze, bitch! Or I'll kill your counselors! Like this!" Blam! He fires the 45 and we see a bullet going straight through the head of one of the counselors, coming out the back, splattering pieces of brains and blood. The Gash jumps up and yells at him, "Are you insane? She just surrendered, jackass! Weren't you listening? We had peace, and then you restart the war. Very heroic. Thank you, Captain Shit-for-Brains." And the Black Dwarf, with spears of the Atlantazonian warriors pointing in at him from all sides, drunkenly says, "Sorry, Mayor's idea. Don't know why I listened to him." But the Queen gets up and puts her arm around the Crimson Gash as the unmen cower back behind them and says, "Do not fear, gallant Gash. The terms stand. We are at peace." "That's so sweet," says the Crimson Gash. "Not really," says the Queen. "The unmen are all holdovers from the previous administration. Civil service rules makes it nearly impossible to fire them. Kill as many as you like. To be honest, I begin to think the surface world is not the prize I had imagined. It's really hot up here and dry. Is anyone else dry? I know I am. And frankly, your air smells like a shark fart. And it's kind of hard to breathe." And then final panel, or in the second to the final panel, we see the Queen leading the Atlantazonian warriors and the unmen back into the ocean and saying, "We return to Atlantis in triumph, having proven our superiority to the surface dwellers. Farewell, noble Gash." And the Gash, waving from the beach, says, "Call me! Don't make me come down there." And in the final panel, we see the Gash saluting as a little montage of the American flag and the Piper and some soldiers and some jet planes and some bombs and some explosions. A montage of military might and war behind her in this final panel, and she's saluting. And it says, "The Crimson Gash salutes our brave service people who, in reality, never allow their fondness for blowjobs to conflict with their true love of kicking ass." And then there's a little promo for the next story. But that's the end of the Atlantazon invasion story. That's the entire story. And I wish I could have showed you the visuals, but that's the kind of thing that gets you kicked off the internet. So you just have to search out the comics for yourself. I don't sell them anymore. Maybe you can send a letter to Fantagraphics and tell them they need to reprint the work of Sandez Rey in a book, if you really like it. Or you could be lazy and just like the video. If you like the video, then like the video. I think the button is right over there somewhere. So, cheers America, cheers world. That was Underground Artist Reads an Underground Comic. Sort of books on tape version of an underground comic. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be posting some more well thought out videos soon.